Norman Jewison, in asking me to conduct and adapt the music and arrange it and reorchestrate it, in the process of doing that, conferred on me really a great honor. I took the assignment extremely seriously, as I know Norman did also, because here we had Fiddler on the Roof, one of the most treasured and beloved pieces of work, and it was being put in our hands to put it onto the screen. My connection with the film of Fiddler on the Roof, I think, began about 1968 or 69, and by that time, the music was part of our whole culture and atmosphere, and I imbibed it along with the rest of the public and loved it. And so by the time I met Norman Jewison, I pretty well know most of the score. Norman Jewison and I, we visited Israel. I think we went there to meet Topol and to hear some singers, and while we were out in Israel, it was a wonderful opportunity for me to go to the music department of the university and spend a couple of days listening and taking a few notes. All of this put me in a frame of mind, I guess you could say, or a mode of listening or remembering that I needed not only try to contribute to what Jerry Bock done in Brilliant in Broadway, but also to deal with the Russian aspects of what the story had.
As Joe once said in an interview, this is a show about people who happen to be Jewish. Yes, we had the Jewish flavor, but at the same time, we wanted to concentrate on the emotional reality of the relations between children and parents, and the knowledge that in every culture, parents believe in certain things, and the children may not believe in those things, and it's extremely painful when the children break away from things that the parents sometimes even think of as sacred.
Times are changing, Reb Tevye. The thing is, over a year ago, your daughter Seidel and I gave each other our pledge that we would marry.
You gave each other a pledge?
When it opened in Japan, a Japanese producer said to me, "Do they understand this show in America?" I said, "Yeah, why do you ask?" He says, "Because it's so Japanese." I, of course, then realized this was pretty universal. He was referring to the fact that the show involves conflict of generations. It involves breaking of traditions, adjusting to a hostile environment. All of these things that were true in Japan, as it was in the shtetl, as it was anywhere else.
It's a worldwide success for so many reasons. The music has this international connection, I think, to audiences, certainly in Europe and in the Western world. And this show and the music was a great success in Japan. So one can also say that there are universalisms in music that can be verified, that go from culture to culture to culture. So it has universalisms in fact and in the acculturation that we've all acquired. Jerry Bock, who wrote this fantastic score, I think probably he wrote it from the heart and from the soul and from all of his intuition and the history of his life and his family's life and the history of the culture.
It's an amalgam of my love for that sound in music, Russian composers, Hungarian composers, and perhaps under the umbrella always of preferring the minor key to the major key. And that minor key seemed to express so much of what I felt in writing the score, and I think best expresses the characters who are in our piece. So it's not so much Hungarian or Russian as much as somehow a combination of influences that I dealt with almost all my musical life.
One of the first things, of course, one had to think about was the scale of things, at least from my point of view. The orchestra in the theater may have been 30 players. We probably had 80. People would ask, well, why would you want to take a little chamber piece like that and expand it to 80? What one feels the assignment is to broaden it out. In Norman's film, you can actually see the countryside. You can see the Cossacks and the weight of the horses and the size of the events and so on. So there's a trip that has to be made between what's confined in the theater and put into a 70mm multi-channel sound medium and still be faithful to the original work that was done. And that was the great challenge of in the broadest strokes musically of Fiddler.
To life, l'chaim. L'chaim, l'chaim, to life.
Once I'd listened to the score a few times, I didn't refer much to it again because the process then became one of stepwise building, first of all, the song accompaniments, which had to be tailored to particular singers in each case. And then with Norman's very exacting staging of each song, to the extent that if it was a dance, the set had to be built and the rehearsals were made on the set so that people could move from pillar to post with the camera moves. And you can't really orchestrate the music until all of that's been organized. You didn't want to commit the music to paper until you had a piano sketch which corresponded physically to the choreography. And then when Norman would then shoot the scenes, each setup of each shot is done to a playback recording of what we just recorded the day or two before.
A blessing on your head.
Mazel tov, mazel tov.
To see a daughter wed.
Mazel tov, mazel tov.
The essential challenge of doing the film and adapting and bringing the music to the screen was to capture moments of performance, moments of particular, hopefully, brilliance and communication, emotionally, vocally, instrumentally. And I have to say Norman Jewison was fantastically helpful in that because he's an amazingly gifted guy who can actually perform the numbers himself. He would go through the song and perform it himself with this little twinkle in his eye and sense of fun or drama or whatever it happened to be that people, I think, ended up imitating. So really, he directed the performances in a very intimate way.
If I were a rich man, all day long I biddy-biddy-bum. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. Yabba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dum. Lord, who made the lion and the lamb, you decreed I should be what I am. Would it spoil some vast eternal plan? If I were a wealthy man.
When Norman finally edited the film, we needed some music to open the film for the contractually obligatory credits, and there was, of course, no music in the theater version for that Jerry had provided. And someone had the idea, Norman or me or someone else, that it was Fiddler on the Roof. It should be a fiddle fantasy of some kind. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have Isaac Stern, who was then the most famous working violinist? So I rang him up and he said, I would happy to do Fiddler on the Roof, but send me the music and then I'll let you know what I think. So I wrote him the cadenza and sent it, and he rang back and said, this all looks fine, I will agree to come and record. So the decision to have the additional music was the result of the needs of the film that gave me the opportunity to write the additional music that I was able to do.
I think I realized that it was a film. It was not the musical. That the musical had its own virtues, the film had its own virtues, and they're two separate animals. The musical will pretty much remain what it is. But I loved the film. I loved it even more as I became aware of how much thought Jewison had devoted to it and what he brought to it and the subtleties in it.
I just thought the adaptation was so right for the film, which was more expansive, obviously, than the theater piece, as was the arrangement, but the arrangement never forfeited the honesty of the original score or the orchestration. It just embraced something that only John Williams could do in just a wonderful, ideal way for the film.
And I felt then, and I do now, that it was not only a great honor, but a responsibility to a wonderful show to deliver a set of performances commensurate with the quality of the piece and with people's affection for it. And to the degree that we've done that, I'm pleased and proud. In those years, the Motion Picture Academy had a category for musical adaptation, I think it was called. It was the first Oscar I received. It was an award of which I am very pleased and proud. A lot of work involved in shaping this material, redoing all the orchestrations, hopefully not hurting them in the process, and in some cases maybe offering an improvement or two. It was, I'll say in conclusion, certainly a labor of great love, not only because of the music and the material, but because of, relationships also, the human aspect of it, mostly Norman Jewison. I never got to know Jerry and Sheldon as I would like to have done. But Norman Jewison's been a lifelong friend, and it's an experience that I certainly treasure greatly.
This really was a labor of love. I seriously did not expect it ever to be produced. Neither did Jerry and Sheldon. We just said, we want to write this because we truly love this story. I mean, we actually built a story from those bricks that came from Sholem Aleichem.
Well, Jerry Bock and I had been working together since around 1958, and as a matter of fact, our first show was done with Joe Stein. But we became friends with Joe, we stayed in touch with Joe, and then, I think around 1961, some friend, and I cannot remember who this was, loaned me a book by Sholem Aleichem. Somewhere along the line, we found the Tevye's Daughter stories and thought, these would make a wonderful musical.
They started with the outline and eventually the script. But as Jerry Bock likes to say, in the beginning is the word.
The one thing we all agreed on was that although we wanted to preserve the Jewishness of it, still we wanted also to preserve what we felt were the elements that would reach out to everyone, parents and children, the problems of children breaking away from the traditions of the parents, all of those elements that made it universal. We wanted to emphasize that. At first, we decided we wanted to do the Zeitel story, the Huddle story, the Chava story.
Our usual technique was to have us both read the material. And I guess because music is more abstract than the particular lyric needed to set down the moment, I was able to take musical guesses, imagining what some of the characters' mouths might sound like, what the environment might produce in terms of musical flavor, etc.
For instance, Tevye's dream, we knew that would have to be there. And as a matter of fact, since the dream seemed so theatrical, we thought, let's start with that.
For such a match I pray. Mazel tov, mazel tov. In heaven it was made. Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Jerry and I have had a process. I've never worked with any other writer this way, and it's for me, it was a wonderful way to work. We would each go into our individual studios and think, and when Jerry had an idea for a musical number, for a character or situation, he would sit down at the piano, he would compose it. When he had it to the place where he thought, this is as much as I want to do with it right now, he would record it. And then he would send me the tape. Well, it was very exciting to hear this world premiere, to put the tape on the tape recorder and listen to these melodies for the first time anybody was hearing them.
I first sit at the piano and ramble, and then certain moments come that I wish to repeat and eventually begin to tape. I'll record it and eventually send Sheldon anywhere from a half a dozen to a dozen melodic possibilities, harmonic possibilities, what have you. I'm aggressive enough to tell him where I think these melodies should belong and who should sing them, and Sheldon disregards that completely, fortunately.
He always prefaced the selections by saying, I think this is for the butcher, I think this is for that character, or this. I don't remember whether he said, I think this is for the dream. But I listened to the music and I thought, to my taste, that's the dream. So I wrote lyrics to that. Then, when lyrics were written, then we would get together, and the final part of the process was playing it over and over. And I would learn the music, I would sing it. If it called for more than one character, Jerry would join in. And only by repeatedly singing it did we realize if it was as effective as we thought it would be. Did it need changes in the lyrics? Did the lyrics need to be polished because they didn't sing well? All of those elements. Until finally we got a draft of it. At some point, Joe began to give us input, give us scenes. And Joe would make suggestions as to where the songs might fall, because once the song is written, then the book writer has to go back to his book and figure out, how do I lead most smoothly into the song? How do I lead most smoothly out of the song? So we worked quite closely. At a certain point, we had an act.
Matchmaker, matchmaker, I'll bring the veil. You bring the groom, slender and pale.
We had written this song, We Never Missed a Sabbath Yet, and I loved one of the themes from it. Dee-dum-bum-ba-ba-ba-da-ba-bum-bum. When I gave Jerry the lyric for the new song, Matchmaker, he took that theme and adjusted it. So instead of dee-dum-bum-ba-ba-ba-da-ba-ba-bum-bum, it became dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee.
Matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match. Find me a fine, catch me a catch.
Never wastes anything, that Jerry Bock. So that's where that music originated.
Find me a match of my own.
Matchmaker was a result of the wonderful essence and content of the story. We wanted to reveal early on that the three daughters may not embrace the matchmaking process immediately, and of course that established the questioning of tradition in its earliest form. Matchmaker may have been the first clue to that, so it's more than a song of entertainment with the three girls singing it.
Dear God, was that necessary? Did you have to make him lame just before the Sabbath?
I did feel that Tevye, the character, would be clearer and would be saying how he feels most directly if he chatted with his best friend, who happens to be God.
They gave each other a pledge. Unheard of. Absurd.
And so it was a device that I fell in love with. I thought it was exactly right for this character. It's never insulting. Sometimes he gets annoyed. In other words, it's a friendship, like I talk to my brother.
Jerry and I and Joe had been invited to a Hebrew Actors Union benefit on Lower 2nd Avenue. We went to see it, hoping that there might be some types. A mother and daughter came out and sang a Hasidic song with no words, just boy, 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 boy. And it was delightful. Jerry was enchanted by it. He went home and he worked all night. And he called me the next day and he said, I have a piece of music for you.
I guess our variation of it, when it came to write Rich Man, it seemed so natural to express a kind of inner spiritual gurgling of joy and wonder.
And I thought, the melody that you've given me is perfect for If I Were a Rich Man, because I'd been investigating the stories, and Tevye keeps saying, oh, if I had a fortune, if I were rich.
I realize, of course, it's no shame to be poor. But it's no great honor either.
The way the song was written, we agreed I would try and preserve some of those nonsense syllables, those Hasidic syllables. So when I wrote the lyric, I thought, okay, there's a section here for those kind of syllables, but how do you get those sounds down on paper? And I don't even know how to, I can't sing in that style. So I had to invent syllables that sounded vaguely like they were Hasidic syllables, and that's where diddle deedle diddle digga digga deedle diddle dum came from.
I wouldn't have to work hard. Yabba dibba 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 dum. If I were a bitty, bitty rich, idle, diddle, diddle, diddle man.
Sabbath prayer was derived from Joe's scene. He had written a scene and knew that it led to the family celebrating the Friday night, having their dinner and starting it with a prayer.
May God bless you and grant you long life.
May the Lord fulfill our Sabbath prayer for you.
Jerry, again, that's a piece of music, came first for that song, and it was on a tape, and I heard it, and I thought, oh, this is absolutely beautiful. Sometimes when you get a piece of music, there's something about the music itself which will elicit lyrics you hadn't thought of, or at least that's so in my case. I don't think I could have written that particular lyric if the music hadn't come first, but it suggested things to me, and I wrote it.
I went for flavor. The character association to a particular melody came later, and that was a result of a continuous effort to find the right song for the right moment, or the right musical melodic moment, or the right harmonic moment, what have you.
In many, many shows, the opening number is not written until the end, because it takes that long to really know what the show is about. Jerry Robbins, we had months of pre-production meetings, and he always asked, what is this show about? And we would always say, well, it's about this dairyman, and he has these daughters, and he's trying to marry them off. Jerry would say, that's not what the show is about. That's part of the plot. But he said, no, there's something that gives these stories a power. And at one meeting, one of us said, you know what it's about? It's about the changing of a way of life in this community. It's a breaking away from tradition. And Jerry's eyes lit up and he said, if that's the case, then every scene, as much as we can, should be about that, about the changes in tradition or the preservation of tradition. And if that's the case, then we have to have an opening number which is going to show the audience some of these traditions and tell them that that's what the show is about. So the last thing we wrote was tradition.
That community was one of our characters. We had to create a community that people believed that this is how they lived. I went by my instincts. I went by the stories I heard from my parents and the kind of people my parents were. Once we created a community, I wanted to get a feeling of the way in which they behaved and the way in which they reacted to how our central story was developing.
Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset.
To speak about Sunrise, Sunset, let me say this. We were working at his studio in New Rochelle, and he had sent me a tape with that song on it, which I loved. And I thought, I don't remember whether Jerry's preamble to it said, I think this is for the wedding, I don't remember. But I thought, that sounds like for the wedding. And I had an idea, once I thought that's where I think the song should go, for some reason the first chorus of lyric came very fast.
Is this the little girl I carried? Is this the little boy at play?
The lyric crystallized on the music.
I don't remember growing older.
Then I happened to be in Washington sometime after that, where my sister lives in Bethesda. Song is easy enough so that I could learn it. And I played it for her, and at the end I looked at her and she was crying. I thought, ooh, wow, this song is better than we think.
I think the score became more popular than the individual songs. But if Sunrise or Rich Man took off by themselves, that was an accident. I look back on it as a constant surprise as to how it's retained itself in its own way through the years and through the world. That, to me, was a gift beyond measure and beyond thought. We put our hearts and souls into the piece because it meant something very special to us.
A lot of people didn't think this could be done. But I'm a firm believer, anything can be made into a musical if the people who are adapting it see it as a musical and are passionate about it.
I was attempting to tell a story of a fascinating community that once lived and was by now dispersed, to show its joys, its sorrows, to give a feeling of the essence of that community so that the audience can feel a part of them and realize that they, as humans, are very much similar to the rest of humanity.